What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. We are back in the garage with the 1 Series and the E92 M3, and I keep getting asked this question from a lot of you guys. Now that the 1 Series has the Recaro Sportsters and the E92 M3 has the Recaro Pole positions, which seats do I prefer and why? So today we are going to take a little deep dive into both of these seats, the setups that I have, what I prefer now, and how my mind has sort of changed on one of these seats. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so if you are familiar with these two cars, this is my 135. I have converted it over to a 1M clone. Now, one of the biggest problems with these E-Series, E-chassis cars, in my opinion, is the seating position. So I went ahead and actually ordered these Recaro Sportsters for the 135 just to lower the seat position a little bit, and it made a huge difference. The seating position with these seats in this car is pretty much perfect. I don't really have anything that I would change on it. It's very comfortable. It's right where you need to be. And we will talk a little bit more about that later. When it came to the E92 M3, I wanted to try something different. I had always loved the pole positions, but I didn't want to order the Sportsters all over again since I already had a set. So I ended up going with the ABE Recaro pole positions. Again, the seating position is perfect in this car, and just like the E82, the E92 from factory has a really high seating position. Now, for reference, you guys, I'm 6'2", I weigh 185 pounds. I guess I'm like average build, you know, I'm not huge, I'm not tiny, I'm right in between, and I find that these seats fit me perfectly. There are some obvious differences between the Recaro Sportsters and the Recaro pole positions, but at the same time, they're kind of similar. So let's go ahead and hop in the E82, and we'll talk a little bit about the Sportsters, and then we'll flip over to the pole positions, and then we'll talk a little bit about which ones I prefer now and why. All right, so in an attempt to show you guys literally everything about these seats on both cars that I love and don't love, we're just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna show you guys me getting in the actual seats. So again, 6'2", 185, and you fall right in. Really, I don't find these to be that much more difficult to get into from factory seats. Obviously, you have a bit more side bolstering right here. The difficulty of getting in and out with this side bolster and this side bolster is actually worth it, in my opinion, because the driving is phenomenal. When you are in this seat, you are very cupped in, you are right in the position that you need to be in, and they just feel amazing. Now, these are the Sportster CSs. As you guys know, they have like the M Performance Recaro Sportsters that you can buy for these cars. They're very, very expensive. These are not quite as nice as those, but for the price you pay, these are a phenomenal option. If you guys are interested in any of these seats, any of the mounts for either of the cars, I have everything listed down below, as well as full build sheets for each car, just to make things a bit easier for people who are trying to replicate what I'm building or just see what each car has in terms of modifications on them. Make sure you check those out, really good resources. But like I was saying before, when you are in the Sportsters, it is a direct shot onto the steering wheel. I've had a few people ask me if the seating position is clocked differently at all, and for me, no, I haven't had any issues with it being too off center or facing in the wrong direction. When I did have my Sparco QRTs, that was an issue that I ran into in my E36 M3. However, that could have been floor mount related. One of the perks of having an E82 and an E92 is these cars actually share the same floor mount geometry. So I can actually put this seat setup in that car, or I could put that seat setup in this car if I really wanted to. But I've found that I actually prefer having the pole positions in the E92 M3, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we hop into that car. So when it comes to the floor mounts for this car, I have the Mach Schnell universal floor mounts, which really gives you just the amount of adjustability that you need in case you did want to clock the seat into a certain direction or off center it, whatever you would like for your seating position. Some people also talk about when upgrading seats like this, you know, you will have a lower center of gravity when you are sitting in the car. For me, I prefer that. Kind of reminds me of how my M4 GTS was. It was a very low feeling car in the F82, and that was one thing about the E-Series that I just didn't like. You seem to be sitting really high in all of the factory seats. When you do go lower, however, you are naturally going to be a little bit farther from the steering wheel. They do make spacer kits for your steering wheel to bring those out a little bit and closer to your face. However, I have these really long, gangly arms, and I find that it actually is quite nice and perfect right where it needs to be without having to adjust it too much. If I did want to, I could bring it out a little bit, put a little bit closer to me if I needed to. However, I think this is perfect for me. I really don't see the need to adjust it too much. Nice part about obviously having the Recaro Sportsters is that you have your full adjustability. You know, if you have back seats and that's something that you frequent, you may want to think about getting the Sportsters. Neither of these cars have back seats. They do have rear seat deletes, so I'm not really accessing the rear. But you know, if it's a daily driver, then the Sportsters are probably going to make more sense for you. In terms of the fabrics, I went with very similar fabrics on both seats. I ended up going with the leather, or I guess they call it a vinyl, and then the Alcantara. So it's like a two-tone. Both fabrics are black, but it does look like more of like a two-tone style seat. I think that that just kind of matched the style of my cars, being that they're all leather and Alcantara. Anyways, driving with the Sportsters has been really good. You know, these are seats that you could definitely track in, you could definitely street in, and you could definitely daily in. They kind of do it all. You have your seatbelt receptacle when you use the VAC receptacle mounts. It just mounts like a factory seatbelt. There's really no difference there. However, you will see the difference with the seatbelt when we go into the E92 and we talk about the pole positions. There is something to be said. You could also run these seats technically with a harness. However, the holes are so low that it's going to be very uncomfortable, and I don't even know if it would be like really safe to do that. But I guess if you were like a shorter person, you had a shorter torso, you could probably get away with doing that. I just think that these seats, you know, these seats are made for a street car. And if you are someone who is going to be tracking the car often, these are probably not the seats for you. These make a really good option for people who just want a aftermarket sportier seat, but you know, also need to put like the kids in the back, or oftentimes accessing the back seats. The amount of times that I have actually used this off of camera, maybe once. Like, I don't ever use it at all. But you know, if you needed to access like the low pressure fuel pump or something often, or change out the bucket, or do any kind of modifications in the rear often, then I guess, you know, it makes more sense to have a seat like this. But for me, once I get the cars set up the way I want them, I'm maybe gonna need to access that back area like twice a year. So for me, it's really not that big of a deal having the adjustability. However, I do find that the majority of people that are looking to upgrade seats talk about the Sportsters before they talk about the pole positions. And I think that that's just because the majority of people are not like tracking these cars. They're more like street cars, and they do it for style and design. And speaking of design, I think these seats are beautiful. I think that the Recaro Sportsters are just, they have a really, really good look to them. Some people say that like Recaros are overrated, they're played out, but I think that there's a reason that they're popular. And speaking from experience from having, you know, a few different setups when it comes to Sparcos, I can definitely say that the Recaros are just on another level in terms of quality. These are just made better, they feel better, they look better. That's subjective, but I think the Recaros are just a better brand in general. Now, when it comes to the Sportsters, these are gonna run you about $1,500 per seat. So these are manual seats. You lose all of your electronics. You can buy these with heat if you want. And so once you start integrating back those electronics into the seat, obviously the weight is going to increase. I think a lot of people who are going to these seats are looking to decrease the weight a little bit, so you do lose some of that. And also, these do not have airbags in them. Again, you can buy them with airbags in them, but the price is going to change dramatically if you want to add all that stuff. So these Recaro Sportsters, just the way they are, stripped down, the basic seat, about $1,500 per seat. So you're talking about $3,000 for the set, and then say about $1,000 for all of the mounts and everything on top of that. So to get these into your car, you're looking at about a $4,000 investment if you want to go ahead and do that. Now, when it comes to the actual weight of the seat, these seats weigh 33 pounds per seat. So they are definitely lighter than factory, but they aren't lighter than the pole position. So let's hop into the pole position and we'll talk a little bit about that seat, and then we'll do some more comparisons and we'll show you some things that I actually don't like about these two seats. Okay, so the same deal when hopping into the E92 M3. You're definitely going to find out right away that you have much more of a ledge to jump over in the pole positions. These are going to be a bit more aggressive, but when it comes to stability, that obviously is going to play a huge role. So getting in and out of these seats, similar to the pole positions, similar to any other seat, you're just doing a bit more of a jump and a bit more of a fall. So you kind of just sink into the seat. But once you're in, man, you are in. These cup you so nicely. And it's a big difference from the Recaro Sportsters to the pole positions. In comparison to the factory seats, these are a massive upgrade, pretty much in every category. Seat position, seat stability, and just overall design and style. The pole positions are gonna be my favorite. They look incredible and they just feel so good once you are in them. Now, when it comes to the install, it's nearly identical to the Sportsters. The only difference is the Sportsters already have holes in the bottoms for the mounts and the sliders, whereas with your pole positions, you have side mounts from Recaro that mount into the side of the seat, and then those mounts go down and create holes on the bottom for your sliders, and then your Mach Schnell floor mounts. Same floor mounts in both of the cars. I'm using the Mach Schnell universal floor mounts, so it gives you a very similar seating position. However, you do have a couple of options with height on the pole positions. Now, I have these at the lowest setting because I prefer that. You could go like an inch higher. They do have some adjustability on the side to raise it up just a little bit. And you could also buy different floor mounts if you wanted it to be even higher. In my opinion, if you went any higher, it would kind of defeat the purpose of using a seat like this. However, with a bucket seat, you fall pretty far down into the seat. I'd say the Recaro Sportsters are gonna be much more similar to an OEM seat where they're kind of flat. Whereas you can see with the pole positions, you have a big slope where the butt and the back meet. So you're kind of falling into this bucket seat, but that is why it feels so good and so stable. It's hard to say if these seats would be more comfortable over the Sportsters in, say, a 5 or 6 hour long road trip, but I have spent about an hour and a half in them and they've been fine for me. I've had zero issues with them. I feel like I could drive them for 5 hours, no problem. If you find that these are just too upright for you in general, you're probably gonna get annoyed of them pretty quickly because you do not have, obviously, that adjustability on the back. In addition to that, you also have these shoulder bolsters that are going to be much more aggressive than the Sportsters. These can also be a deal breaker for some people because they do sort of push you out depending on, you know, where you fall into the car and what your body geometry is like. It just so happens for me that they're a little bit lower. They're almost like right underneath my armpit, but they really don't bother me. I don't find myself needing to stretch or anything like that. It just feels comfortable the way it is. If you are a bigger guy, these are probably not going to be comfortable for you. Now, I do want to mention that these are the Recaro pole position ABE models. So these are the street models that Recaro has developed. However, now they have the ABE Classics, which are a little bit different. Very similar, but a little bit different design. So the ABE was developed by Recaro to have more of a street-friendly pole position, so people didn't have to run the FIA or NG models on the street, which is technically just a track seat. But with the ABEs, they have a little bit wider geometry, they're a bit more forgiving, and then they also have bigger holes on the side for your seatbelt receptacle to go through. These were simply developed for a street alternative to the track pole positions. Now, when it comes to the design, again, I went with the black Alcantara with the black leather or vinyl, and the branding is very similar to my other seat. It has the Recaro, it's white and black, it matches the interior. It's kind of boring, but I like it. I think it's more of like a classic design, and I think it flows well and nicely with my interior. Now, one thing that you'll notice right away with the seatbelts is they come over just like a factory seatbelt, and you can actually take the receptacles and move them around so they come through here, and that is how you actually want to fasten the seatbelt. You don't want to do it over the top, because then you wouldn't be buckled down all the way. You actually want to send it through here. Now, some people say that you should send the receptacle through here and then plug it in. But if you do that, this seatbelt receptacle is going to be digging into your thigh. It'll be super annoying. So what I like to do is actually send the seatbelt through and then position the receptacle back here and plug it in. Just seems to be much more comfortable that way, and you're not jamming yourself on the thigh with the actual receptacle. So that is why I don't put the receptacle through here, which I think for a street setup makes the most sense. These are the VAC seatbelt receptacle adapters, which allow you to run your factory seatbelt receptacles with the entire seat setup. In terms of positioning, it's the exact same as the Sportsters. It's dead center, it's straight on, it's not clocked weird. But again, with the Mach Schnell universal floor mounts, you could position it to whichever angle you'd like if you wanted to. To give you some quick stats on the seats, they are about the same price. So these are $1,500 per seat, roughly, depending on which style you get. There's a lot of different prices online, but I've just found in general, these are about the same price when it comes to the Sportsters or the pole position. Obviously it's fixed back, you don't have the adjustability, you can slide it on the sliders front and back. I got sliders for both of them because I did want to be able to move it forward without having to like unbolt and rebolt everything. In terms of positioning, I find that it's pretty much perfect. It's pretty low. It's a little bit lower than the Sportster, but again, everything is more aggressive with the pole positions for good reason. It's more of like a racing style seat. In a car like this, and even a car like that, I actually prefer that. These are my weekend cars. These are my project cars. You know, I'm not really like daily driving these cars. So for me, it is really nice to get into it and just feel like I'm in more of like a fun, performance-driven street car or race car. And ultimately, that is why I like these seats so much in this car. In terms of the weight of the pole position, these are 15 pounds, so a little under half of what the Sportsters are, and they are dramatically lighter than your factory seat. The other thing that's interesting is I actually weighed this seat with all of the mounts, the sliders, everything, and with everything in the car, it came out to be 63 pounds lighter than the OEM seats. So this car actually lost 63 pounds by going over to the pole positions. If you are a track guy, that is a ton of weight to lose in the car, and to do so just by simply getting the seats that you want. So I find that to be a huge advantage if that's important to you. If weight isn't important to you, then, you know, obviously it's not gonna really matter. But in terms of style, I think that the pole positions are a better style. I think that they look cooler. Again, that's going to be subjective. Some people are going to say, I think the Sportsters look cooler. It really comes down to whatever you like most and fits your build most, obviously. But after owning both, I actually do prefer the pole positions. And that's something that I didn't think would happen. I was actually very hesitant to buy the pole positions because I was afraid that they would be too aggressive for street driving. I was afraid that it would actually deter me from wanting to drive this car, and I have found that is actually the opposite of that. I want to drive this car more because it has the pole positions. You know, I do have some people who say, oh, you should put the pole positions in the 1M clone. And the reason I don't want to do that is I actually drive this car more and I like these seats more. And honestly, what will probably happen is I might end up selling the Sportsters down the road and pick up another set of pole positions because I just prefer them in these cars. Some people are going to think I'm crazy for that, and I understand your sentiment, but I am crazy and I do actually prefer having a seat that's a bit more aggressive and just race oriented. It just gives the car a different vibe when you get in it and when you get to drive it. And the stability that you get out of the pole position is just phenomenal. Like, you feel absolutely locked into this seat and engaged into this car. And I think that when you're making upgrades on these, especially these older cars, these type of seats really make a huge impact on a car that is all about connectivity and just bridging that gap from road to driver and the vehicle in between. These seats just add to that element. And then these cars, you know, where you don't have all of the electronics, you do go back to hydraulic steering in the E92 M3. You do have the manual gearbox and the 3 pedals. This seat is the icing on the cake. It just really gets me more excited every time I get in this car and I hear that V8 and I'm ripping it. It just feels so good with these seats. That's more of a nostalgia thing, but it is real, and that is something that needs to be talked about. So another thing I wanted to point out with these seats, and this is the same for the Sportsters, I am starting to get a little wear along here. Just little lines in the leather, and the reason being is, well, this seat belt hangs over like this, and when you're getting out and getting in, it's such a dramatic jump that you inevitably end up rubbing on the side, and it does make little marks in the leather, which is unfortunate. You know, it made me feel like I was ruining the seat at first, but I guess it's just part of the ownership experience of having these seats. It's not terrible, but it is something that is going to happen inevitably. So you kind of have to be prepared for that. You also have this goofy little guy right here, this plastic piece on here on the seatbelt, and it likes to rub right along the side. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And so in terms of actual seat belt positioning when you are in the car, this is one of the things that I noticed pretty quickly is your seat belt will start to raise up to your neckline. And I find myself often moving it down a little bit so it doesn't hit my neck. And so I'll either pull my shirt up a little bit like that or pull this down a little bit. It is something that it's unfortunate, but this seat is sitting so low that the seatbelt has a lot of height to make up for, and so it kind of just crosses over your shoulder. Obviously, there are ways to fix this. You could run a seatbelt pad. I just don't like those, and I don't like the way they look, and so that was kind of off the table for me. Or you could just raise the seat a little bit, and it would probably raise your shoulder a little bit, helping that. So I've sort of just positioned myself properly to make sure that, you know, it doesn't happen as often as possible. And so to give you guys an idea, you can start to see the little wear marks that are happening along the side here. I only have a couple of them, but it's gonna happen, dude. It's gonna happen on both of these seats, and it's really unavoidable, to be honest. That's just the nature of the seat and the seating position and getting in and out with both of these seats. And now to come back over to the Sportster, you're gonna see I have the same thing going on over here. So this seat belt is sitting across like that, and it's scraping on there, and it just starts to make some little wear marks there. So you can run, like I said before, you can run your harnesses in both of these seats, but they're really not made for harnesses. The holes are a lot lower, and so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to run harnesses in these seats. I mean, these are more of like a street seat, but I guess, you know, the option is there if you really wanted to. So there you guys go. That is my take on both of these seats. I love them both. They're both phenomenal. I do think, however, which is surprising, that the pole positions make a bit more sense to me over the Sportsters. The Sportsters in general are probably going to be more popular for the majority of people, being that they are adjustable, being that they are definitely more street friendly. I just find that for these two cars specifically, right now, pole positions kind of just make more sense because they are more project car oriented, and I'm not daily driving these to an office or anything. If I were, and I did want to have an aftermarket seat, I would probably go for the Sportsters. But if either of these were daily drivers, I probably wouldn't have even bothered upgrading the seats, to be entirely honest. So if you guys are looking for any of the install videos, I have all of that stuff linked down below, as well as the full build sheets for both of these cars. And of course, we have the website with all of the modifications listed. Make sure you guys check that out if you need any of the resources. But in terms of weight, you're losing a little bit more weight with the pole positions, but you are gonna lose weight overall no matter which seating setup you get. In terms of cost, you're probably gonna spend about the same, regardless if you go with the pole position or the Sportsters. And at the end of the day, it's really just gonna come down to the driver and what you guys prefer and really what kind of build you're building. But hopefully this video helped you guys out. I tried to be as specific as possible. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much.